We are so far removed from the idea of America and its minarchism written in the United States Constitution, where we have to bring her back to where she belongs. Thank you for listening to this episode of Chasing Life, Liberty, and Minarchy. And welcome to this episode of Chasing Life, Liberty, and Minarchy. I am your host, Mr. Roderick Threets, and I welcome you to episode number 3 of The Shield of Liberty, National Defense in a Minimal State. Those of you that are new to the Sunday program, I appreciate you. Make sure you have liked and subscribed. And please make sure, if you're definitely deeply libertarian minded or want more understandings on liberty, and particularly what I believe is the most ethical state, the minimal minarchist state, I encourage you to go listen to the 3 previous other series I have done on this. I've broken it down in an intricate way, so it's palatable and understandable without all the philosophical nuance that you hear, from minarchists, or what few of us are out there, right? Because those of you know that I am a minarchist by heart, hardcore, deep to my bones, because I know the only ethical state is the minimal state. Anything else outside of that is bullcrap and baloney. So I want y'all to sit back and relax and take notes for probably the next 35 to 45 minutes. But what I do want to do is I have to address, I know I addressed it on, excuse me, Southern Liberty, right? But I need to address it here from a minarchist standpoint. So because those of you that have listened to this whole series and understand me in private conversations we've had together, you have a better understanding of where we're going with this, right? And I'm going to pose the question: since when did the political left, the statist left, become minarchists and champions for property rights? And y'all know I'm talking about that Renee Good situation, right? I wonder when they actually became the statist left became minarchist. Okay. Now we've heard the perspective from the other side, right? And I'm not talking about the whole, oh well, she was dropping her kid off in school, this, that, and the third. I'm talking about the other arguments they're literally making, right? That the federal government violated the non-aggression axiom, right? Because they're trying to tell you that the proportionality, right, of what happened, right, and the nature of the road, right? Now, when we talk about the road, we got to talk about public easement, right? And a lot of us minarchists believe, we argue that public roads are considered essential commons, right? And if Renee's car was parked, forget the lines a second. If the car was parked, she was exercising her right to use that space, unless she was actively ramming people or blocking traffic, right? Because blocking traffic is a civil infraction or a nuisance, not an act of aggression, right? Now, y'all hang with me a second on this one, right? Because now the proportionality argument comes into play, right? Because if we concede that blocking a road is a technical violation, right? A technical violation of the non-aggression axiom, right? Then the response must be proportional. Now, again, right? Remember, this is their argument, right? Shooting someone multiple times for a parking violation or for impeding progress is a massive escalation of force, right? And we got to remember, right, as minarchists, right, we believe that the state's use of force is only legitimate to stop an equal force. Right now, remember, we're not talking about the car going into motion here. I'm just talking about the base of the argument because they don't talk about the car in motion. Or the only thing they see is, oh, he shouldn't have been standing there and she tried to get away. Not the fact that the machine, a 2-ton machine, backed up and ran into the guys. Right? They missed that part. They just skipped like, oh no, she's trying to get away. Right? And again, right, they're using a minarchist argument against the federal government while missing details, right? Now, you heard the other part of that, right? Where they say, oh, she was a legal observer, right? Okay, I get it, right? Because somebody has to watch the state, right? Somebody has to watch the state. We, the people, are supposed to watch the state, right? And if a citizen is using their property to stay near a state operation to ensure no rights are being violated, that would be to check on state power. You would agree, right? Now, now, the left is trying to say that the state is using blocking traffic or impeding, right, as a pretext to kill a citizen who was simply recording them, right? Then the state has ceased to be a protector and has become a violator of the non-aggression axiom. See, this is the left's argument when it comes to this, right? Because we know parking is not violence. We know that, right? But again, I have to keep explaining so no one is off track. This is the left's minarchist style argument against the state. I mean, I'm still trying to figure out when that happened, right? But let's talk about the real thing that happened here, right? Let's break this all the way down. The road is owned by the state. And those of you that are new, the state meaning the government, right? The road is owned by the state via taxpayer dollars, right? The state owns the road. So you impeding the progress down that road is a violation and can be seen as an act of aggression because you don't stake claim to that property. They give you lines that you are permitted to park your vehicle. And they create ordinances and statutes to make sure you comply to those lines in the road because, again, that's the state's road. It's their rules. It'd be no different if the road was private and the individual laid stripes on the road and said, you can only park here. But if he walks out and sees you blocking his road, access to through his road for whatever reason, and you move that vehicle, that property owner has every right to deem your vehicle as a threat on private property and waste you. You see how we wrap that together, right? There's no intent or non-intent to kill someone with a vehicle. You were told to stop. I don't care if it's an ICE agent or the private property owner. You are told to stop. And if that property owner feels threatened by you moving that vehicle, you will get wasted. Let's keep that on principle. This is why I wish we lived in a minarchist type system. because these things wouldn't matter. But I want to get into this so we can get up out of here. That was my 2 cents on that. In the previous two episodes, we talked about why we need a military, right? And how to pay for it without an income tax. Okay. Today, we're going to address the most terrifying reality of political science: force. Because force is a two-edged sword. The same sword that protects you from a foreign invader can be torn inwards to slice through your Bill of Rights. And we've seen it, right? Non information board, right? Well, it was in a misinformation board they tried to put together. Reagan's repeal of the Fairness Doctrine, right? And many others that infringe on the rights, right? Assault weapons bans, right? Terry v. Ohio, Kerr versus California, Pennsylvania versus Mims, Rodriguez versus Castle Rock, right? We've seen that same sword slice through our Bill of Rights. I want to put something in context, okay? History, okay, is a graveyard of republics that were murdered by their own protectors. Right? Think about the Roman Republic a second. It didn't fall because of the lack of military power. It fell because its military became more loyal to its generals than to its laws. Right? And we see this example. I don't want people to think I'm bashing our military, but let's really think about this a minute, right? How many people, how many military members came out on social media and told you that if the president issued martial law, that they would uphold it and shoot you dead? How many of those members you've seen online say that? There was one particular one, her name was Chicken Nuggets on TikTok, said that, and she was a staff sergeant. There's many of our military members that have said that on social media, have yet scrubbed them, but she's the one I remember vividly because we all rode her ass until she got off the app. Because that's not what we swore an oath to. We swore oath to the Constitution, not the commander in chief, not the generals, not JSOC, not company commanders, or in my case, director generals or commandants. We swore to protect the Constitution from enemies, foreign and domestic, not generals. But that's how Rome fell, right? When the if we continue with this history lesson, right? When the professionalism of the Roman legions took place, the soldiers' paycheck and their retirements were no longer guaranteed by the state, but by the commander, right? Right. And if you remember, right, when Sulla, right, and Caesar later on marched on Rome, they didn't do it with the people. They did it with the professional cast of men who knew nothing or no other trade but war. This is why I say that the minimal state faces a classic dilemma, right? To be safe from a global superpower, right? You need a high tech, lethal force. But to be safe from that force, you need to be structured in a way that it cannot function as an instrument of domestic tyranny. Today, we are challenging the modern cult of professionalism and arguing for a return to the most radical idea in defense history: the citizen soldier. Before I get into this next section, I've titled "The Danger of Permanent Warrior Class." Please make sure you like, subscribe, all that good stuff to the channel. Make sure you subscribe to everything on you on you can do YouTube, but for more, it's more about the audio. Apple, Google, Spotify, all that. Anywhere you get your podcast audio, we're out here. All the shows, Southern Liberty, Fifth Estate, Experience Today, and Chasing Life Liberty Minarchy. We're on it. We're on it. So make sure you subscribe. I appreciate that very much. Now, let's look at our current reality. Okay. Our current reality, what we have, we call an all volunteer force, right? Our military is an all volunteer force known as conscripted, right? On paper, this is a libertarian victory, right? As I said, no conscription, right? But in practice, we have created something the founders deeply feared: a permanent, isolated warrior caste. Less than 1% of our population currently serves. This creates a psychological firewall between the people and the cost of war, right? And when the military is a separate class, war becomes an abstract concept for the average citizen. It's something that happens over there, performed by those people who signed up for it, because you don't have skin in the game, because your son isn't in the infantry and your neighbor isn't in the cockpit. You're less likely to protest when a state engages in forever wars. The state can keep the machine running indefinitely because the civilian population feels no friction. All right. Furthermore, as I say, the professional standing army requires a massive permanent bureaucracy. The Pentagon is the largest employer in the world. This bureaucracy has its own interest, its own lobbyists, and its own survival instincts. It needs threats to justify its budget. But in a minimal state, we must dismantle the state within a state. We need a military that is a dominant power, right? Like a fire extinguisher on the wall, not a fire that has to keep burning just to stay alive. So I think the next question some of you are asking is, how do we build a military that is lethal to invaders, but harmless to citizens? Let's look to Switzerland a second. All right. For centuries, the Swiss have maintained their sovereignty in the heart of a blood-soaked Europe. Right? Think about it. They were neutral in World War One, World War Two, all of that. They didn't move a lick, did they? They didn't move their position. They stayed neutral, didn't they? Not with a. Remember, they didn't do this with a massive standing army, but with a decentralized nation in arms. Right? In a minarchist framework, right, we would advocate for a core and shell model, right? The core is the tiny elite group of professional officers and technicians who maintain the most complex systems, right? Think about nuclear silos, satellite arrays, and high end cybersecurity. But the shell, the bulk of the fighting force, is the people. Okay. Imagine a system where military training is a rite of passage, but military service is something you do while living your civilian life, right? For example, you're a software engineer, a plumber, a farmer, but you keep your kit and your training current. Most importantly, we decentralize the hardware in our current system. The state keeps all the toys, right, on federal basis, right? In a minimal state, we utilize a distributed defense model. I know it sounds interesting, doesn't it? Right. But by spreading the means of defense across the states and local communities, you create a check and balance on force, right? You cannot have a military coup when the army is actually the people themselves, dispersed across every town and city, holding the keys to their own defense, right? An army of citizens is an army that will never march on its own neighborhoods. I want you to think about that a second, right? I want you to think about that a second, right? Because I don't want people to make a mistake that it's mandatory service. No, it's not mandatory service. It's the people are the army, right? And look, this is how the founders intended it. I want you to think about that a second. I want you to think about what I just said. I'm gonna throw it up on the screen a second, so you so it's understood. All right, let me see if I can get it on the screen real quick. So let's get this thing on the screen a second. Let's go. Boom. What does the Second Amendment say? Oh, it went too far. Let's scroll down. What does the Second Amendment say, guys? A well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. The militia, right? Remember what I just told you, right? Remember what I just told you, right? If, right? Remember, core and shell, right? The core is the tiny group of elite professional officers, but the citizens, the people, are the actual fighting force. Go back to the Second Amendment, right? What is the shell in this situation? What are the people? The people are the militia, right? And you train to make sure your skills are still on par. A well regulated militia. I hope it's clicking, right? If the people are like every single citizen that is over the age of 18 is the army of the country, then mind you, I don't want y'all to confuse this with conscription, right? Because conscription is mandatory, right? But the militia, as the founders wrote it, and if you look in majority of your state constitutions up to probably the 21st, 22nd state, a well-regulated militia, the militia is talking about the people and citizens of the state. Let that sink in a second. That's why I said we've gotten away from what the founders intended. We got very, very far away from that. No matter how you slice it. Like, and even under this model, let me see if I find it real quick here. Okay. So we're gonna go past that a little bit because I can bring that up later. But you see my point, right? The citizens are the army. Now, imagine if we were in that system, right? None of our people, none of the citizens would volunteer to walk into other countries to fight them. Now, would we? Right? If the citizens are the army, how many of them will want to go to another country to shoot bullets? Right? Decentralization from the government, right? So they don't have complete full control. Because now they have control where they can force you, once you sign that contract, force you into places that you may not want to be. But if we get rid of that enforcement and all the citizens are the Army, the Navy, the Marine Corps, et cetera, the defense of the country, they can't do that, can they? Now, my critics will say that may have worked in the 1700s, but you can't fly F-35 or manage a cyber war as a part timer. This is always a fundamental misunderstanding of where technology is going, right? We are moving out of the age of great battalions into the age of autonomous decentralized defense, right? The future of war is drones, sensors, and encryption, right? These are fields where the private sector is already leading. A minimal state does not need a million men in barracks. It needs a sophisticated network of automated smart fortifications and a citizenry that knows how to operate them, right? Think about this a minute. Think about cybersecurity, right? The best soldiers for a digital invasion aren't sitting in a government building in Virginia. They are working at tech startups. They're in Austin, Texas, in Silicon Valley, right? And by leveraging the expertise of a free citizen, right, the minimal state can maintain a high tech, I call a high tech moat, right, without the overhead of a standing infantry. We replace the standing army with standing readiness. We use technology to make the individual citizen more powerful and a central state less necessary. I wonder how that sounded to some of you. Sounds kind of amazing, doesn't it? See, let's keep on mind, right? Keep in mind the citizen soldier has the ultimate veto on aggression, right? Because the moral heart of such person or of the model itself, right, is that it acts as a natural brake on government overreach, right? A standing army is an offensive tool. A militia is a defensive one, right? And I want you to think about that. Think about what I just said and going back to what I said before about the citizens being the army, right? Because a standing army like we have now, Army, Navy, Air Force, Marines, Coast Guard, Space Force, right? They are a standing army. They can be used and have been used as an offensive tool. I mean, we just used it in Venezuela, right? As an offensive tool, regardless of the outcome, right? The basis of it is an offensive tool. The militia, right? The citizens are a defensive one, aka National Guard. Let's use National Guard in this sense because it's the state militia, right? They're not offensive at all. They're defensive, right? They're defensive, right? Because if you have, think about it, if you have a professional army sitting around, The government is always tempted to find a mission for it. As the saying goes, when you have a hammer, everything looks like a nail, right? But when your defense force is made up of your neighbors, people with jobs, families, and lives, they will only go to war when the threat is real and undeniable. If a politician wants to invade a foreign country for regime change, he has to convince the people to drop their tools and pick up their rifles. If the people don't believe in the cause, they won't show up to the muster, will they? This, my friends, is the ultimate democratic veto. It ensures that the only wars we fight are the wars that actually matter to our survival. It collapses the military industrial complex because there is no permanent hungry machine that needs to be fed with new contracts and new blood. Listen, we've come to the end here a little bit. I hope y'all learned a little something or two or three, right? Well, as we wrap this in, right, I want you to think about that image of the shield from the cover art, right? Who is holding the sword at the bottom? In a minimal state, that is in the hand of a government bureaucrat. That's the hand of a free citizen. That shield of liberty on that artwork is only as strong as the people behind it. When we outsource our defense to a professional cast, we lose our warrior spirit and we lose our oversight. I want you to think about that a second, right? I'll repeat it again. When we outsource our defense to a professional cast, we lose our warrior spirit and we lose our oversight. We got people that are not willing to fight for what's right because the government has used their ability in the Constitution to recruit this professional cast and at the same time turn off the people that may want to join, right? This is what we're talking about. People at large lose their warrior spirit. And this is why you have people say, "Oh, you're America first. You're pro-American. You're a flag. You're this. You're this bigot." No, I'm sorry, sir. I wear this American flag on me all the time. I wear it on my hat. You, sir, are the bigot. You are the weakened warrior. You have they've told you to call people like me all these different things because I am proud of the country that I live in, the country that I served. Right? You, sir, that are calling me all these things are the one lost. You lost your warrior spirit. And I wouldn't expect you to be on my side or by my side if we have to fight an enemy invading us because you will run to the hills like a little bitch and hope the enemy captures you and treats you a certain way. When we take back the responsibility for our own defense, right, we ensure that the military remains the servant of society, not its master. That's the other part to think about, right? Joe Biden came out. We got F-16s and all these planes and missiles. What are you going to do against it with your little AR-15? Remember when he said that? He's telling you the military is no longer the servant of society. They're the master. They are the masters over society. And they're telling people like Joe Biden and other politicians are telling you this. I want to thank everybody for stopping by. Those are your first time again. Go back, listen to the other episodes I talk of this Sunday show, Chasing Life, Liberty, and Minarchy, and how I break down Minarchy in many different ways to get to it. Because again, the minimal state is the only ethical state. Period. Right. So thank you for joining me for this episode of Chasing Life, Liberty, and Minarchy. Our next episode in this series of the Shield of Liberty, we're going to tackle the external side of this equation, right? How does a minimal state interact with the rest of the world? Next week, we're in episode 4. I already have it titled as No More World's Policemen. And we'll look at why non-interventionalism isn't isolationism. It's the only way to stay free. So until next time, y'all, love your neighbors, love your family, but ultimately, please love yourself. Because if you do not love yourself, you cannot love anything else. Until next time, y'all, peace and love.